So of my 8 books that I chose for the favorite ones I read from January to through June or to now, one of them that I have not talked about yet is Wild Seed by Octavia E. Butler. And this is the second book that I read by her. The first one I read was Parable of the Sower. And it's very, very usual for me to read the first books of series and then not the second ones. So coincidentally, I've read 2 books of hers from different series. I don't know if that matters or not, but there's kind of some like overarching themes though. They were written kind of far apart. I think they were written maybe 10 to 20 years apart, the 2 that I've read. And this Wild Seed one was written earlier. But both of them in their fantasy, or in their science fiction fantasy, this one's more fantasy than sci-fi actually, now that I think about it. But both of them have kind of a certain type of entity that's like an empath. So Parable of the Sower, it's the main character that is in first person, so it's a lot more prominent, and that one would probably be easier to discuss the concept. But there's also the same sort of special power in Wild Seed too, and so basically what it is you can feel other people's pain, like literally same level, perfectly matched. If you're around someone in pain, you also feel it completely. So with Parable of the Sower, it being first person and the main character, it's like easier to kind of understand it, I think. But basically it's to the point. It's where these types of people with this power, they can't even commit self-defense, because if they are attacked and then they turn around and defend themselves and hurt the person who's attacking them, then immediately they'll feel all the pain that they inflicted upon the person who they're trying to defend themselves from. It's pretty fascinating. I think that it's one of those instances where fantasy kind of she's considered a science fiction writer, but it feels like fantasy to me. It's one of those instances where it's sort of like, it feels like it's almost like an autobiographical fantasy, or like a self-analyzing fantasy, because like it's kind of clear to me that since there's these 2 main characters that have this skill, I imagine that Octavia E. Butler had a great understanding of empathy. I sort of wonder what other running themes of sort of powers and things like that are in her other books. The Wild Seed one is a lot more. The world is a lot more unlike our Earth, or the characters are not human, I guess, because there's like shapeshifters and immortals and stuff like that. It was kind of actually challenging, like Parable of the Sower was the first one I read, and it is basically about an environmental crisis, and it's about the main character, who is sort of the empathetic character. It's a narrative that's kind of like the catastrophe is happening outside, and like outside of her community, and like resources are dwindling, and then finally it gets to the point that their community collapses and they have to leave, and then it's kind of her trying to find salvation in that way. Perhaps some religious symbolisms in it, but also, environmental catastrophe is a topic of discussion very frequently. But this Wild Seed one is actually a lot more complicated to me. It basically begins with this woman who's sort of like a spiritual member of her community. We learn that she's an immortal. And then she gets sought out by a man who has this same, he's also immortal, but he's like a villainous immortal. And he basically persuades her I think by threatening her family even, that she has to come with him. And then essentially the reason he wants to align with her is because he actually wants her to breed like a superior race with the other people that he recruits. So it's kind of, historically, it's like examining certain aspects of history probably, or making sense of them and the evils of it. But it's also interesting because she is a shapeshifter, and she can shapeshift into animals or even different humans. So this villainous supernatural man is trying to, utilize her abilities, utilize her shape-shifting abilities, and then also utilize her immortal abilities to kind of form a superior race. There were a lot of interesting commentaries, and I feel like Octavia E. Butler, she was a black woman, and she writes about race through the lens of fantasy and science fiction. And I feel like she writes about it in a way that's like it's a lot of pride. Like her characters have a lot of pride in who they are. Like, for example, this Wild Seed book, The Shapeshifter Woman, technically she can shapeshift into whoever she wants. Like she becomes like a dolphin, all this other stuff. She can shapeshift into a man, which of course, that's sort of like another subcategory that we could talk about with like sexualities and stuff. But she can also shapeshift into different races, but she chooses not to, for the most part. There's like a scene where like she's supposed to be partnered with this white man, and he asks her if she can shapeshift into a white woman. And of course, at first, because it's like she's offended by it, and then he explains because he used to have a white wife or something, but like she still doesn't want to do it because it's like that's not who she is. There's like kind of stuff like that that kind of go along with the theme of kind of pride and yeah, I guess I'm kind of the thought's not fully realized for me, so I'll probably have to think about it some more. And if the other books I read by her kind of have the same concepts, then I'll definitely come back to this one, or maybe I'll just talk about it anyway. But when I ordered it, it was signed by her. That was crazy because she passed away. I'm not sure when, but a while ago, and it had her signature on it, to Brad, good reading, which I guess if it's signed to someone, it's not worth as much, but I wasn't going to sell it anyway. It's more valuable if it's just a signature, apparently. But I'm going to read more of her stuff because I actually found at the Half Price Books in South Bend, I found one of her trilogies, which had an interesting publishing history. So it's 3 books, and it's called the Xenogenesis, Xenogenesis. That includes 3 novels, so maybe this will be the first time that I actually read a whole series. And the novels are Dawn, Adulthood Rights, and Imago. Anyway, the publishing history of this book is that it was published as a trilogy called Xenogenesis, Xenogenesis, and then it came out as re-released under a different title, and then it came out re-released a third time with Xenogenesis and the other title, both in the title. But I found a hardcover edition of the first trilogy released, which they referred to as an omnibus. Shout out to graphic novels. But I don't know. It wasn't too expensive. But it's cool that I found this old copy of it with a cool cover.